All right, so it's February 15th, 2026, and I want you to just take a second.
Well,
Look at your phone, your car, maybe the news headlines today.
it's everywhere.
It is. And if you were to go back, say, just 5 or 6 years to the early 2020s, and you told someone that the guy posting memes and selling flamethrowers
Right.
would effectively be running a parallel geopolitical ecosystem by now, they would have called you crazy. But here we are.
It really is a different world. We aren't just talking about a CEO anymore, not even close. We're talking about the architect of what economists and political scientists are now calling the Musconomy.
The Musconomy. And, it sounds like a buzzword, but when you actually look at the stack of sources we have for this deep dive, the biographies, the Q1 financial reports, court documents from Delaware,
The political fallout analysis?
it's the only word that really fits. He isn't just participating in the global economy. He's built this vertically integrated silo that touches global infrastructure, defense, AI, and
And as we've seen so starkly, the very machinery of the U.S. government.
it's a massive tangled web.
And we're going to try and untangle some of it today. We'll look at the wealth, which is just unprecedented, the tech consolidation, the political power plays.
And the personal life of a man who, let's not forget, started out coding a video game called Blaster when he was 12.
And sold it for $500?
$500. So our mission today is really to move past the headlines because they are exhausting and figure out the mechanics of how we got here. We need to understand not just what he owns, but how all these pieces fit together to create this massive leverage.
And to understand the leverage, you had to start with the raw numbers. I mean, they've fundamentally broken the curve of modern wealth.
Let's just look at the scoreboard then. As of right now, mid-February 2026, the estimates for his net worth, they're sitting somewhere between $844 billion and $852 billion.
So just pause on that for a second. To put that in perspective, he is nearly $600 billion ahead of Jeff Bezos.
$600 billion.
The gap between number one and number two is larger than the GDP of most European nations. It isn't a race anymore. It's a completely different species of wealth.
So how did it jump so high so fast? I know Tesla stock has always been volatile, but this feels like a quantum leap from, even 2024 or 2025.
It's the result of a few high-risk, burn-the-ship strategies all paying off at once. But the primary driver, the thing that really sent the net worth into the stratosphere in 2026, was the mega merger.
Which just finalized.
That's a couple of weeks ago, yeah, February 2nd.
You're talking about the consolidation of SpaceX and XAI.
Correct. This created a new single entity that is valued at $1.25 trillion. And this is where we need to get into the weeds a bit, because it's not just a financial merger, it's a technological integration.
So you have Starlink, which is the connectivity layer.
The nervous system, exactly. Then you have Grock, the generative AI, which is the brain, and you have the rockets to launch the physical infrastructure. But the thing they're pitching investors on is this concept called Orbital AI.
I saw that in the briefing notes, and I have to admit, I was skeptical. Putting data centers in space just sounds like an engineering nightmare. You've got radiation shielding, cooling servers in a vacuum. I mean, you can't just use fans.
No.
Is this actual tech, or is this just another hype cycle to pump the stock?
And that's the skepticism the market had at first. But this is where the vertical integration of the Musconomy flexes its muscles. The engineering documents showed that the Starship fleet isn't just launching these centers.
What? The Starships are the centers?
Yes.
Yes.
They're using the cryogenic fuel boil-off systems, which is normally just waste, to cool the server racks.
So he's turning a fuel constraint into a thermal management solution. That is actually remarkably clever.
It is.
Yeah.
And then look at the energy economics. On Earth, AI is hitting a power wall. The grid can't support the next generation of training runs.
Right.
In low Earth orbit, you have access to continuous solar power. No night, no clouds, no atmospheric interference. He essentially has an infinite unregulated battery to power the insane computing needs of AI.
Which feeds directly back into Grock. So if he has the cheapest compute, the most abundant energy, and the fastest transmission through Starlink, he effectively corners the market on AGI training.
Precisely. It's a closed loop. He builds the rockets to launch the servers, powers them with solar, trains his AI on the data, and beams it all down to Earth. No other company, not Google, not Amazon, not Microsoft, has that physical infrastructure stack. That one entity now accounts for about 2/3 of his net worth.
But we can't ignore the legal wins back on Earth that set the stage for this. The Tesla compensation package was a huge saga.
What was a soap opera? Remember, a Delaware judge voided his 2018 pay package.
Right, they threw it out.
But then in December 2025, the Delaware Supreme Court reversed that. They restored the package, which brought, what, about $139 billion worth of stock options back onto his balance sheet.
And didn't the shareholders also approve something called the Mars Shot package?
They did. It's a new performance-based deal, basically designed to incentivize him to stay focused on Tesla amidst all these other ventures. Financially, he's secured the floor to potentially become the world's first trillionaire by next year.
It's staggering. Okay, but let's pivot to what this money is actually building on the ground. Because Tesla doesn't really look like a car company anymore.
Not at all. If you look at their investor days over the last year, the whole narrative has shifted to robotics. They are pricing themselves as an AI and robotics firm.
With the focus on Optimus.
The humanoid robot, yes. The goal is mass production of labor. And then you've got the Cybercab, which they piloted in April. No steering wheel, no pedals, just a fully autonomous transport pod. Tesla's $1.5 trillion market cap is based on the belief that he solves real-world AI before anyone else.
And all the while, SpaceX is just operating without any real competition.
Nomination is the only word for it. They control 80% of the commercial launch market. Blue Origin is playing a very, very distant game of catch-up. He's effectively monopolized the path to orbit.
And then there's Neuralink. This is the one that always feels the most sci-fi to me. I remember the first patient moving a cursor, but where is that tech now?
Well, as of late 2025, they had 3 human patients with implants, and they've moved way beyond cursor control. The new frontier is blind sight technology.
What's that?
Bypassing damaged eyes to stimulate the visual cortex directly. The goal is to restore vision to the blind.
That is legitimately incredible. But you have to balance the miracle with the method. The sources mention some pretty dark history with the testing.
You can't gloss over that. There were significant controversies, federal investigations into monkey deaths during the early testing phases. The descriptions of the suffering were gruesome.
But the FDA approvals kept coming.
They did, and the human trials are proceeding. It's that classic Musk tension. Rapid, almost miraculous tech advancement paired with ethical costs that a lot of people find unacceptable.
And speaking of costs, let's talk about X, formerly Twitter. Because while the rockets and robots are soaring, that social media platform seems to be bleeding money.
By every traditional metric, yes, the data is clear. Daily active users in the U.S. were down 18% year over year by early 2024. And that trend has not reversed. Advertisers left in droves. Fidelity estimated the value dropped 80%.
So why keep it? If you're obsessed with efficiency, why hold on to a money pit?
Because in the Musconomy, X isn't a social network anymore. It's a data mine. It serves a different purpose now.
It feeds the AI.
It's the real-time information feed for XAI, exactly. Grock trains on that constant stream of conversational data. Plus, they just launched X Money in early 26, pushing peer-to-peer payments. He's still trying to force it to become the everything app. So even if it loses money on paper, it provides the raw material human language, human reaction that his AI needs.
Okay, so we have the money, we have the tech empire. But in the last 2 years, the story really shifted to politics. This wasn't just a CEO tweeting anymore. This was a direct intervention in the American government. We have to talk about the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE.
This is crucial to understand the Musk of 2026. We saw a complete political migration. He went from a centrist voter to being the single largest donor for the Republicans in 2024 and fully backing Donald Trump.
And he didn't just donate, he got a specific job.
Right. Early 2025, he was appointed senior advisor and the de facto head of DOGE. The mandate was to cut the federal budget and consolidate agencies. And he approached the U.S. government exactly like he approached Twitter.
Slash and burn.
It was the hardcore management style applied to the civil service, mass layoffs. We're talking approximately 149,000 federal employees let go. They just eliminated the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau entirely.
But we have to pause here, because the efficiency narrative hits a very hard wall when we look at the human impact of these cuts. The source material on USAID, the Agency for International Development, is incredibly difficult to read. We're not talking about firing bureaucrats in D.C. anymore.
No, we are not. When DOGE slashed the USA budget, the logic was America first fiscal discipline. But the downstream effect, according to a modeling estimate from Boston University, severed the supply lines for malaria medication and emergency food aid in sub-Saharan Africa almost overnight.
And the report estimates over 300,000 deaths by May of 2025, mostly children.
Yeah.
It's staggering. And this is where that CEO mindset applied to government arguably failed catastrophically.
Exactly. In a company, if you cut a non-performing department, you lose revenue. In this context, you lose lives.
And that sparked an international firestorm.
Oh, yeah. Bill Gates did not mince words. He publicly accused Musk of, and this is a quote, killing the world's poorest children. It was a massive international scandal that really tarnished that savior of humanity image he tries to project.
So he's slashing the government and he's facing this global backlash, but then he suddenly leaves the administration. Why? Was it the backlash or was it something else?
The resignation happened in May 2025. And while the humanitarian pressure was immense, the actual break was over something called the One Big Beautiful Bill Act.
That sounds like a Trump name.
It was the president's signature legislation. But here's the ideological clash. Musk is a deficit hawk. He believes the U.S. is going bankrupt.
And Trump wanted a massive stimulus bill.
Exactly. Musk criticized the legislation publicly, said it increased the deficit and undermined the very work he was trying to do. So he walked.
Which did not go over well at the White House.
Not at all. The feud in June 2025 was public, and it was messy. Musk tweeted allegations linking Trump to Jeffrey Epstein. Trump fired back on Truth Social, threatening to cancel Musk's government contracts.
Which, as we just established, are vital for SpaceX. If the government stops buying launches from him...
The monopoly crumbles. Exactly. Musk apologized a few days later. He knows where his leverage ends. But the relationship is still very complex. And it's not just U.S. politics. He's been supporting right-wing figures globally. The AfD in Germany, Javier Milei in Argentina. He's operating almost like a state actor, conducting his own foreign policy.
It really blurs that line between business and geopolitics. But speaking of controversies, we have to address the inauguration incident, January 25, the salute.
That was a flashpoint. Musk made this gesture, arm extended, palm down, that many people interpreted as a Nazi salute. Neo-Nazi groups on X were celebrating it immediately, claiming him as their guy.
But, and we have to be precise with the sources here, the ADL did come out in his defense.
They did. They argued it was an awkward wave caught in a freeze frame. They disputed the intent. But the thing is, in a place like Germany, where Musk has significant manufacturing assets, intent doesn't always matter as much as perception.
There were calls to nationalize the Gigafactory.
Right. It just highlights how dangerous it is for a global CEO to play these kinds of edgelord games in the political arena.
And you know, for a guy who calls himself a free speech absolutist, he seems to spend an awful lot of time in court suing people for speaking.
That is a contradiction the sources highlight over and over. He sued Media Matters, a watchdog group, demanding their donor data after they reported on ads appearing next to hate speech on X.
Which feels less like a legal defense and more like intimidation.
Critics certainly argue that. He also threatened to investigate anyone who was impeding his work at DOGE. And then there was Grockopedia, his AI encyclopedia launched in late 2025. It was supposed to be a neutral alternative to Wikipedia, but was widely criticized for factual errors and a really significant right-wing bias.
And then the Epstein files. January 2026, this was the big shoe everyone was waiting to drop.
It was. And the reality, based on the released emails, was sort of mixed. They confirmed Musk and Epstein had cordial exchanges. Musk asked about parties. They joked about kung fu.
But the emails also showed him declining invites to the island.
Correct. The smoking gun wasn't there. Not in terms of him visiting the island. Musk's defense was that he thought Epstein was a creep, and that the whole release was just a distraction orchestrated by the administration to punish him.
Which brings us right back to that feud with the White House. It's all connected. You know, there's a strange parallel between how he manages the world and how he manages his own bloodline. We've talked about his desire to populate Mars to ensure the survival of the species.
And he's not just doing it with rockets. He's doing it biologically.
It's the pronatalist ideology in practice. As of this month, the sources confirm he's fathered at least 14 children that we know of.
14. And the timeline is chaotic. You have children born to different mothers, Grimes, Siobhan Zillis, and now the recent revelation of a child with Ashley St. Clair, all overlapping within months of each other.
Yeah.
It's almost like an industrial scaling of a family tree.
It is. But you also have the estrangement. His trans daughter, Vivian Jenna Wilson, has very publicly cut ties with him, calling him uncaring and narcissistic.
Which stands in stark contrast to his rhetoric about saving civilization. He wants to save the species in the abstract, but seems to struggle with the individuals in his immediate orbit.
And we can't ignore the health aspect. He's been open about having Asperger's, but there's more to the picture.
The sources point to reports of substance use that have genuinely worried his board members. We're talking about ketamine use, both prescribed and allegedly recreational, and other drug allegations.
And his coping mechanism is intense gaming.
Elden Ring, Diablo 4, he calls it mental calibration. It seems he needs that high-intensity stimulation even when he's off the clock. He doesn't really do relaxing in the traditional sense.
So let's just try to bring this all together. We have a man worth nearly $1 trillion. He controls access to space. He controls a massive AI infrastructure powered by orbital energy. He has his hands on the steering wheel of the U.S. government's efficiency, or lack thereof.
Critics are using the word oligarch, not in the Russian sense of stealing state assets, but in the American sense of accumulating so much power that you exist outside the traditional checks and balances.
That's the scary part, isn't it? When you look at the Musconomy, it's not just a collection of companies. It's a closed loop. He builds the robots, powers them with his solar, connects them with his satellites, and launches them with his rockets.
And he has the ear of the president when they're not fighting, and the ability to sway global markets with a single post on his own social media platform.
It really brings us back to a concept we haven't seen since maybe the East India Company. We're looking at an entity that has its own transport, its own communication network, its own currency, its own diplomatic relations.
And now, potentially its own territory on another planet. He has effectively privatized the concept of the superpower.
So the question for you, listening to this, isn't just whether you like Elon Musk or hate him. The question is, in a world where one man can turn off a country's internet or bankrupt a federal agency on a whim, does democracy still hold the ultimate power? Or have we already transitioned into the Musconomy without even realizing it?
That is the trillion-dollar question.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you next time.